Support for this podcast comes from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative, connecting communities with the resources, infrastructure, and networks to ensure a vibrant local free press. And join us for the upcoming Central Valley Daily Social. Come to the KVPR studios to get a behind-the-scenes look at the making of this podcast. Join us Thursday, October 9th for pizza, drinks, and a Q&A with the podcast team. Space is limited. Find more details, including how to RSVP, at kvpr.org/events.
From KVPR in Fresno, this is Central Valley Daily. It's Thursday, October 2nd. I'm Elizabeth Arkalian. The U.S. government is under a partial shutdown as Republicans and Democrats battle over funding priorities.
Republicans want to pass a funding measure that is what they call a quote-unquote clean continuing resolution.
Coming up, we will unpack what this shutdown means for California in the meantime. But first, these headlines. The federal government has shut down for the first time in nearly 7 years. Yosemite National Park and others will stay open, though, but they will have a limited staff. This means some services like visitor centers, restrooms, and trash collection could be closed to visitors. Essential staff like first responders and law enforcement are still working. Wednesday marked the first day of California's new water year. Cap Radio's Manola Sequeira has more on what to expect this fall.
The state's wet season typically begins in October and sticks around until May. Since 2023, the state has seen fairly wet fall and winter seasons. Carlin Namath is the director of the California Department of Water Resources. She says she expects to see more of the same this year, including big swings between weather extremes.
When we have some storm events, they tend to be big events. And then after that event has passed, when we get into a dry period, that drying is more intensive than we've seen in California in the past 100 years of record keeping.
During the last water year, Northern California saw above average precipitation, while parts of Southern California experienced notably dry conditions. State officials say they expect that dynamic to continue and emphasize the need to capture and store water to prepare. In Sacramento, I'm Manola Sequeira.
A new study has found that Fresno is one of the top cities across the nation where household income has grown the most. KVPR's Samantha Rangel has more.
Finance tech company Smart Asset analyzed Census Bureau data to see where incomes are rising the fastest. Nationwide, the median household income grew just over 1% last year because of inflation. Fresno stood out. Median income here jumped more than 10%. Reaching over $74,000. Families with children saw the biggest jump of nearly 30%. And that's all in a single year. Fresno ranked 4th in the nation for income growth, right behind Long Beach and San Francisco. Analysts say the changes can have big impacts, from influencing future tax policies to shaping the local demand for businesses. With KVPR News, I'm Samantha Rangel.
A long-awaited attraction in the city of Clovis broke ground this week. Wildwater Adventure Park is starting construction on its Endless River attraction. The 900-foot-long ride will feature a beach-style entry, multiple access points, and food and drink pop-ups along the course of the river. Local leaders say the idea has been in the works for 25 years. The Endless River is expected to open up in early 2026. Beer lovers rejoice. The Fresno Chamber of Commerce says Sequoia Brewing is returning to Fresno. The popular chain closed its doors earlier this year, but business leaders say the company's North Fresno location will be back open to customers starting next Friday, when they'll host a ribbon-cutting ceremony. The company's Tower District location is set to reopen within weeks. Sequoia Brewing has its roots in Fresno dating back to 1989, when it opened under the original name, Butterfield Brewing Company.
Support for Central Valley Daily comes from Body 20 in Fresno's Fig Garden Village, offering full-body electromuscle stimulation training sessions. It's a high-tech, time-efficient way to help preserve and rebuild lean muscle. Each 20-minute one-on-one session is guided by a certified coach using FDA-cleared technology. Body 20 accepts health savings account cards. More information available by searching the Fig Garden location at body20.com.
And now to our main story. As of this recording on late Wednesday afternoon, the federal government has been officially shut down for nearly a day. Republicans and Democrats in Congress are at an impasse over a funding plan for federal agencies. And while not all federal services will be affected by this shutdown, it does highlight all the national agencies we rely on each day. Think of the U.S. Postal Service, the National Weather Service, our national parks and museums, not to mention the military, Department of Agriculture, and more. The last government shutdown happened in the last Trump administration in 2019. Like then, this budget fight in Washington is having ripple effects across the country. And today, I'm joined by CalMatters accountability reporter Jeanne Kuang to discuss how California is impacted by a government shutdown. Hey, Jeanne.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yes, thanks for being here. Okay, so to start, we know the government officially shut down at midnight on October 1st. So just to get really basic here, why did it shut down?
So the reason it shut down is Democrats in Congress have been demanding from Republicans and from President Donald Trump to roll back some of the health care cuts that were part of the spending plan that Trump signed earlier this summer, known by some as the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. They've mostly been demanding to restore healthcare cuts, in particular, an end to subsidies that help people who buy insurance off the marketplace, such as Covered California. So without an extension of those subsidies, we're looking at people who are mostly low and middle income households who buy healthcare from Covered California. They will see their premiums go up. The subsidies they were a tax credit that were used to help people pay for their premiums and offset the cost. So we are looking at about 1.7 million Californians who are likely to see their premiums go up next year or, next enrollment, which starts soon. And so that was kind of the impasse that Republicans and Democrats found themselves in Congress, which led to them not being able to pass a continuing resolution to fund the federal government.
I want to note that things can change really quickly with these shutdowns. So do we have any sort of historical reference for how long previous shutdowns have lasted? Like, could things change by the time people hear our conversation on the podcast Thursday morning?
Certainly things could change. I'm not in D.C. covering Congress, so I don't know what the exact tone of the conversations and negotiations are at this moment. But, both sides had their heels dug in quite a bit in the days leading up to this shutdown. In the past, shutdowns have been anywhere from a few days to, the last time there was a shutdown was during the first Trump administration. That lasted for over a month. So, on average, I think we're looking at 5 to 7 days is somewhere in that area, and it's just quite uncertain how long this one could go for, just because, yes, it could change, but it didn't appear today like the parties were any closer to an agreement.
So for this shutdown, folks might have seen that leaders on both sides of the aisle are giving a lot of grand statements, and there's a lot of finger pointing going on. For listeners, can we just explain specifically what Republicans want? Because you mentioned Democrats want to roll back some of those healthcare changes that were passed. What do Republicans want?
Republicans want to pass a funding measure that is what they call a quote unquote clean continuing resolution, which is essentially just, funding at current levels, the same thing. So it wouldn't change those spending priorities that were part of the bill from the summer.
Outside of this healthcare debate, this government shutdown will have a significant impact here in California, as you've reported. So give us an idea of how this will affect people in our state.
Yeah, California has about 150,000 federal workers. Those people are all facing the prospect of not just being furloughed or having to work without pay during this shutdown, however long it lasts, but, the presidential administration is considering it seems to be pretty seriously threatening mass firings and mass layoffs during this time. So that would obviously impact those people and their families, but also the broader California economy. We're also looking at the prospect of potential social service interruptions. Now, an important note is that Social Security and Medicare, these are considered mandatory programs. And so the actual services should not be impacted, like benefits payments should continue to go out, for example, for Social Security. But if the workers in those programs are not working, there could be customer service interruptions for people who need to do things like verify their paperwork, or maybe if they lost their Medicare card or something happened to it and they need to get a replacement, like a lot of those things that you would do, the administrative stuff, that could definitely be affected. It could be delayed or slowed down. There is some concern about the continuation of services such as CalFresh or food stamps, and WIC, the program that helps a lot of low-income families feed their children. In the past, the state's Department of Finance notes that they were able to have contingency plans for these types of programs when they faced shutdowns before. They could do things like try to advance 1 month of payments, or use federal funds that they had previously had that didn't get spent and kind of move it over during a shutdown. But these are all things that the state this time says they're not sure they can do, just given the nature of this shutdown, how the president has been really wrestling with Congress to try to get the ultimate spending authority from them. You know, he's really taken the position that he has the right to either claw back or stop, the flow of federal funds that Congress has already authorized. So looking at that situation, the state says it's really unsure. One, it obviously doesn't have the money to backfill federal services. Federal funding makes about a third of the state's budget. But even beyond that, they're just not sure they can even have contingency plans given the uncertainty around how this shutdown is being handled by the president.
Yeah, and I want to note you mentioned several different agencies that could be affected in different ways. I do suggest people look up different agencies that they're curious about or concerned about, because this is affecting them in a lot of different ways. Some are just pulling back on services. Some are finding ways to fill in. So it's really varying department by department. Speaking of one department in particular, I found it interesting in your report for CalMatters how you discussed national parks being affected. Specifically, you painted a picture of what happened at Joshua Tree National Park the last time the government shut down. And I thought you could relay to us just what you heard from folks about how these shutdowns affect parks that we have here in California.
Yeah, my colleagues who have covered this issue note that essentially the last time that there was a shutdown, that was the one between 2019 and 2020, when it lasted more than a month. They kept the national parks open, but there wasn't enough staffing to maintain things and to clean the bathrooms and to make sure that people aren't driving onto sensitive areas, and just to overall sort of enforce the rules. And so there was some damage, there was some concern over conservation and just overall, toilet paper and trash piling up and things like that. And I think that is something that could happen again this time around, just depending on how long the shutdown lasts, because the Interior Department has indicated that they will be keeping the parks open. And that's even something that some governors of other Western states had wanted, because they were concerned about tourism in their local communities and they wanted people to still get to, visit the parks and spend money in the surrounding towns. But it is something that some parks advocates and conservationists have been really concerned about. They had actually even asked for the department to close national parks in the event of a shutdown because there wouldn't be staff to do that kind of maintenance. But for now, it looks like the parks will be remaining open.
Jeanne Kuang, accountability reporter for CalMatters, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
And that is today's show. Today's episode was produced by Jonathan Linden and KVPR with support from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative. I'm Elizabeth Arkalian. You can find the latest local news anytime at kvpr.org.
Sources and methods, the crown jewels of the intelligence community. Shorthand for how do we know what's real? Who told us? If you have those answers, you're on the inside, and NPR wants to bring you there. From the Pentagon to the State Department to spy agencies, listen to understand what's really happening and what it means for you. Sources and Methods, the new national security podcast from NPR.